Hey guys, welcome back to Star Wars Timeline. Today we're returning with our discussion about Star Wars sequels. I'm here joined by Mike. Mike, please introduce yourself, your channel, and where our fans can find you.
Hello there. Hopefully you guys checked out the last episode where we did The Force Awakens. So you should already have checked out my channel and things, but just in case, I have two podcasts. I've got Genuine Chit-Chat, interview style podcast, spoke to a wide variety of people, some about Star Wars, some not. And then I've got Star Wars Comics in Canon, which is made in a way specifically so that whether you've never read a Star Wars comic before in your life, or if you've read every single Star Wars comic, there's still something for you. I go through the plot details and the connections to other content and things. You can find me on YouTube at Genuine Chit-Chat, and you can find me on all the social media places at Genuine Chit-Chat as well. Find me there and you'll be able to be kept up to date with everything I do.
Awesome. And we, as you mentioned, we started our first part in the three-part series of talking about the sequels, right? And we started with Force Awakens. As soon as I posted that on my Facebook group, and I shared it in other groups as well, because I'm shamelessly plugging myself into any Facebook group I can, some of the response was like, "Oh man, why are you beating this dead horse? Leave it alone. Let's keep going with it." And I said, "Well, hold on a second. These movies will be talked about for generations to come, just like prequels were." And I think it's interesting to, in retrospect, to sit back and after all the dust is settles and after everybody sort of kind of like just a tiny bit calmed down of being so vocal about it, we could have now a discussion about it, analyze, see what worked and what doesn't. And honestly, that's the whole point of this podcast, because I know you and I will not agree on everything. Mm-hmm. And it'll just be interesting to hear a different point of view, a fan who doesn't agree with you always. But that's what fandom is all about, listening to all sides. Anyway, let's kick off. And just like the previous podcast, I want to start with like general broad kind of questions and then narrow it down to very, very specific ideas. And we talked about the hype, right? Once we got the announcement, we knew that we're going to get the Star Wars sequels. What was the anticipation like for you awaiting the first, episode 7? Now I want to ask you a similar question. And now try to recall yourself back to when, The Last Jedi, that great, the reveal, the title of the film and the first trailer kicked. What was your first reaction prior to seeing the film? And how would you compare it to The Force Awakens anticipation?
I think that I was simultaneously more and less excited at the same time. It's a weird thing to explain, but it's kind of like, with The Force Awakens, that was basically 10 years of waiting for a new Star Wars film that realistically, up to about 2 years before it was announced, I think, we had no idea. So for like 8 years, we were just like, we're not going to get any more Star Wars movies. That's fine. Just, keep on going. When obviously The Force Awakens came out and you knew it was going to be a trilogy, it was like, oh man, what's this going to be about? And I think after The Force Awakens, we got Rogue One. So around the time I think the trailer for Last Jedi dropped, I'm pretty sure that Rogue One had already been released. I'm fairly certain of that. But like with that in mind, it was like, well, for me, Force Awakens, I loved it. I thought it was excellent. And then, it's not perfect, obviously, but I thought it was a really cool movie. And then Rogue One, loved that as well. Thought it was an incredible movie, very different and things. So I was like, I'm ready to go. I'm happy to see what this is about. I hadn't seen really anything Rian Johnson had done, apart from one episode of Breaking Bad called The Fly, which I think is probably the worst episode of the whole series. But, no judgment on people who like that episode. I know what it was trying to do. I just felt it was just completely out of place. So with The Last Jedi, I was like going into it being like, that episode of Breaking Bad, that's not reflective of his whole directing career. So I was like, what is this going to be about? I saw the trailer and it was like, oh, it seems like it's going to be darker. There seems like, now that we've got the lore, we know where we're at, we know exactly what's going to happen. The big thing I think was, how are they going to tackle Luke? And I think that was a very big part in the trailer, his voiceover. You got to see parts of him, obviously Force Awakens, you got to see Luke, and also part of like Rey's training as well. It was like, when is it going to explicitly take place? Is it going to be directly after and that's it? Is it going to be kind of like Dagobah sort of style, where it's like she's training for an unknown period of time and then she just kind of pops up and it's been months or whatever, who knows, weeks. And so with that, it was very exciting for me. I think the trailer for The Force Awakens excited me slightly more just on the basis it was new Star Wars. But because I thought Force Awakens and Rogue One were so good, I was so excited for Last Jedi. And when the trailer, I mean, The Force Awakens trailer is amazing, but I think the Last Jedi trailer, I would probably argue, is better. I think that if you look at them just as two trailers, excluding all of the sort of background baggage that comes with them,
Right.
the trailer for The Last Jedi is just so expertly done, and it just builds and builds and builds. By the end of it, you're like, I'm ready to go. And then it's like, no, you still got to wait. You still got to wait ages for the film to come out.
Yeah.
So for me, I was absolutely ready to go. I think I saw Last Jedi like once again, day of release, not midnight showing, but you know, the first night it kind of came out properly. And once again, I went with my friends and things. And yeah, I was so excited for this, and I had incredibly high hopes. And you know, we'll talk about how I kind of viewed it in a sense. I mean, what about yourself? How did you kind of view, like, especially the trailer? Like, I rewatched it the other day, and I was like, man, it got me excited. I want to watch the film again. I only watched it like a couple months ago, but the trailer was so exciting for me. I was like, I want to watch it now.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that you also mentioned Ryan Johnson. I also want to bring him up, but you know, so I came away from The Force Awakens, and obviously, you know, 2 years have passed before we got The Last Jedi. You know, my excitement, I think, with the episode 7 was more with the fact that we just got a competent Star Wars movie. It didn't blow me away. You know, yes, came out of the theaters and really had a great time. I enjoyed it. It was very entertaining throughout. It had a heart. It had a spirit. But at the same time, it was a bit grating and annoying. And that was only amplified when I saw it over and over again. It is basically the clone carbon copy of episode 4 with a couple of new bells and whistles in it.
Yeah,
I think it's
a
pretty fair assessment. And you know, so but it's a well-crafted film. You could argue, you know, about its issues, which it does have. It's not a perfect movie. Some people say that it's a little bit too fast-paced, like the movie doesn't give itself enough moments to kind of like take a breather and slow down and have these more nuanced moments. Like especially people had critique of Chewie not reacting to Han's death, and that interaction with Leia was a little bit rushed, and that kind of persisted throughout the whole film. Anyway, so I came away bittersweet. I said, look, this is a decent foundation. This is a good beginning. I really hope they do something else with a new movie, right? And when the trailer hit, it blew me away. I would say it's one of the best trailers I've ever seen for a movie because of powerful music, because you see few short snippets of Luke Skywalker, somebody we've been hungry for, right, all these years, and we didn't get in the previous movie, and now you finally see him on screen. And it's just so raw. And I think Mark Hamill just completely delivers in the film. We're going to talk about this a little bit later. But that trailer just, it sold the movie. And when Ryan Johnson was announced and attached to the project, Fly was one of my favorite Breaking Bad episodes. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. Phenomenal writing in that episode, because we were watching it, me, my younger brother, and my dad, and we had to like explain it, regurgitate it for our dad. Like, Dad, it's not about the Fly. It's what happens there. It's about his guilty consciousness, and it's about Will, exactly. And I thought it was just such a beautiful play on things. It is it's what you would call this 2 men in a room kind of episode, where just two lead actors, and there's nothing else seemingly going on. But it's so rich with like context and all this other stuff. And I said, well, what I'm hoping for is for a more sober film, a darker mood, a film that feels as a part of a trilogy, but stylistically more mature. Because The Force Awakens is very on the surface film, and it doesn't pretend to be anything else, for better or for worse. It's this simple escapist adventure film, right? It's just what you see is what you get. And I love to bring as an example when, you know, Finn's troop mate kind of touches his helmet, like marks him. It's so on the nose. It's so in your face. It almost feels like the film was crafted for a younger audience, which is, once again, it's fine. And what I think was an interesting tie into my experience of The Last Jedi was Luke's line in the trailer when he tells Rey, this is not going to go the way you think. And actually saw this trailer in this very room on that television with my younger brother. We saw the trailer, and I turn around and I tell him, that's what I want. I want it to go not the way I expect, you know. But to keep it moving, you know, and now still talking kind of like broadly before we get into it, because I believe it's a film that has a bit more layer to it than The Force Awakens. I don't know if it's fair to say, and certainly more than The Rise of the Skywalker. I want to talk about the first scene in the film and also make a comparison to The Force Awakens. You know, we have in Episode 7, Kylo Ren's ship land on that planet and apprehend Poe, right? In The Last Jedi, we have Poe flying off the planet in a completely opposite manner and confront the First Order and General Hux, right? So these two first scenes, I feel like they set the tone. They set the pacing and kind of like give you what to expect for the rest of the movie. How did you react to each one?
I think I think it's one of those things where each starting scene had to be different for each movie, because as you say, The Force Awakens, it has to introduce things. The Force Awakens, the first scene, you've got Kylo Ren bad, he just kills people at cold blood. First Order are bad. Finn, there's a stormtrooper who's kind of, he gets the blood smear on his face and things, and you're like, okay, he's questioning what's going on. And Poe is trying to do something to get to Luke Skywalker. Within, 5 minutes, if that, you've already established like 4 major points of the film, which is Ren, Poe, Finn, and then the general plot of the film, which is, Luke Skywalker trying to get the map to him and things. And then with The Last Jedi, it's very telling to the rest of the film in a very different way. It does a lot of like foreshadowing in a lot of ways. You've got, the whole thing is, all those bombers get destroyed as well. That's kind of the final part of that first scene. And when that happens, especially, it's quite a downer. And then you realize that's not the biggest downer of the film. It just goes worse and worse, and you're just watching like more and more people get killed. And obviously, especially the thing that happens towards the middle of the film as well, when they're fleeing away and stuff. But with Poe, when he would like flow up and there's the bit of the humor with Hux and stuff, I enjoyed that element. And then when he's flying and he's doing some of the coolest flying, I think, in Star Wars, I think it's just, where he's outmaneuvering those TIE fighters. You got that TIE fighter that goes through that bit and it splits and then the ball comes off. Every layer of that, him taking down the dreadnought, is just like, that's such a clear show of how good of a pilot he really is. And obviously you get to see it in The Force Awakens, the scene with the Takodana and things at Maz's castle when you see him flying around. But in that, you really see, wow, he's an incredible pilot. Look at this going on. Look at what they're achieving. And, as an audience member, you're like, yes, they're going to destroy the dreadnought. That's amazing. And then it's just at the very end of that first scene, you see Leia's face when she sees on the screen and sees all the bombers gone. And obviously, us as the audience, we're kind of used to being like Poe when we watch the other Star Wars films. We're like, yeah, destroy the bad guy's big ship. Let's do that. And Leia's the more mature voice of reason in a sense. She's looking at it, and it's only subtle. And she looks at it, and then she talks to him afterwards, obviously. But it's that thing of, it's not, everything isn't as it seems. This seemed like a victory to begin with, but you look more into it, and it's actually not. And that is really a very big part of the theming of this film, especially. It's like, as you say, in the trailer perfectly articulates it, everything is not as it seems. And that is one of the biggest parts of The Last Jedi. And I think the opening scene really crafts that well. But I also want to flag up here just a quick thing, a little bit of trivia I like.
Sure.
When Hux gets thrown down by Snoke, you hear, and people, if you haven't noticed this, watch the film and you'll notice it. When he falls down, you hear a really loud crack, and that's the stuntman actually breaking his nose when he falls down and cracks it. He literally does that. That's how hard he fell. So if you watch the film, you'll hear the crack, and it's really pronounced. So I thought that's a cool bit of trivia just to throw in there. But yeah, I think that the scene really, really eloquently frames the rest of the film without audiences for the first time actually realizing that, if you see what I'm saying. I don't know what you sort of thought about that.
Well, very, very
I said a lot.
No. It's I love hearing these thoughts, but it's not at all what I expected from you, because I sort of we sort of cheated. I know that you're a fan of the film. I'm sort of the fan myself, but here's the thing. When I was watching The Force Awakens, I told you, I needed to be the greatest film I ever saw. That's how hype I was. And after that first scene, it's just, the humor didn't land for me at all. The first lines being spoken when that older gentleman played by Max von Sydow says, this will begin to make things right. And go, I'll protect her. That whole exchange of dialogues between all the party members, all the cast, and when Poe has that exchange with Kylo Ren, they have the little funny moment in a very devastating scene. It really was offsetting to me. It just, that the humor that didn't jive, which I felt for the rest of the film was quite okay, quite interesting. In The Force Awakens, I think it has the best humor in the trilogy. But in that scene, it just didn't land, and I immediately toned down my expectation at that. I said to myself, this is more of a kind of like Hollywood Disney-fied movie we're going to get here. So chill out, let it go, turn your inner critic off, and just enjoy the movie for what it is. And surprisingly, the same thing happened with the Last Jedi. when I'm watching the film in the beginning, and I'm asking myself, is it going to be a different experience, or is it going to be more of this kind of like blockbuster, eat your popcorn and be happy kind of film? And when Poe is flying into space, and once again begins this very kind of like modern American sarcastic type of humor, he's making a joke about his mom. I'm like, this is stupid. I don't like this. It just doesn't land for me. And honestly, when Poe begins an attack on the entire Star Destroyer, I mean, we've never seen stuff like this before. He could be an ace pilot times 10. It just didn't make any sense. To me, it was almost like I'm watching two films for the rest of the episode 8. Like, it consisted of plugs that the studio wanted Rian Johnson to put in there. Hey, you got to have this specific type of humor. You got to have this specific type of action. And then the second half of it is the movie I was personally looking for, the most serious, nuanced kind of story that he builds around Luke. We'll get into the details. But that first intro scene immediately made me tone down my expectations, because I was also looking forward to that space battle. When we saw it in the trailer, it was almost positioned like it was going to be towards the climax of the film. And I said, well, finally. Because in The Force Awakens, the space battles were very superficial, very on the surface. There wasn't a sense of tactics or stratagems or war theater in them, right? You see that in the Rogue One. Immaculately done action. I mean, the action is just stellar in that you see the tactics, you see the people constantly communicating with each other. I felt like in the entire sequel trilogy, Imperial troopers or First Order troopers are just barking orders. They're barking the obvious things, and none of it feels like military jargon or stratagems. And when Kylo destroys that one ship and they're on their run, I was like, oh man, I hope it's not going to be the rest of the film like that. And what's going to lead me into my next question is the scene that follows it. When we see back to that moment, right, on Acto, and we see Rey confronting Luke saying like, hey, here's your lightsaber. And I felt it was just, once again, like two different films, because he holds your attention there, right? It's a very tense moment. And the moment that Luke does this, I was relieved. I'm like, oh crap, what did he just do? Now I'm interested. Now I'm invested. So the next question I want to follow up on the, following with this kind of like thought here is the thematic tone of the film, and, how it was different from The Force Awakens, and which personally did you enjoy more?
I think The Last Jedi for me resembles the prequels in a lot more than the originals. Now, it sounds peculiar saying that, but here's the reason why. The Last Jedi has far more ups and downs. It's a lot more risky. There's a lot more bits in it. Like I could probably count 10 moments, just like 20, 30-second snippets, which I really do not like about The Last Jedi. And Luke throwing his lightsaber is actually one of them. But because there's just these moments that I feel like the humor doesn't match the rest of the 9 films at all. The Force Awakens, there is some humor in there that's a little bit disjointed. I personally like the Kylo Ren Poe bit at the start. I think it breaks the tension a little bit, and it shows that Poe doesn't really take things seriously enough, and that's kind of his problem. So I quite like that element of it. But with The Last Jedi, although there are a lot of scenes that I do find are funny, especially upon the rewatch, they don't land in the same way for me. And I agree with you with the part where Poe is saying, when he's talking to Hux, I like the bit up to the point he says, and his mother. And you're like, okay, but then that's the moment where Hux realizes and stuff, so it kind of works.
Yeah.
With the thematic tone of The Last Jedi, the humor is not like the humor is in any of the other films, because Rian Johnson's humor, he can do humor quite well, but Rian Johnson's whole thing is, I'm trying to think of the term of it, where it's like, it's what magicians do. It's when you guide someone to look one way and then you suddenly flip it,
Yeah.
And it's changing expectation. And I'm trying to think of the exact term, but I can't remember it at the moment. But he does that so frequently in the film. Although I think I do really, really like The Last Jedi, I think the biggest problem with it is so often it's trying to pull the rug out from underneath people. It's so often being like, you think it's going to go this way, and it's not. And every 10, 15 minutes that happens.
Yeah.
You've got it with the Poe bit at the start. You've got it with there's the bit towards the end of the first scene, which, when the bomber comes down, it's all very emotional. And it goes on forever. You've just got this woman who's like, oh no, she's the last bomber. What are they going to do? And then, the top bit explodes. And then she can't get the switch thing. And then she's kicking the thing, and then that falls down. And then it falls past her. And you're like, okay. And then she grabs it, and you're like, come on. And then when it happens on Arcto, you're like, oh man, there's Luke. It's really serious. What's going to happen? And he just goes, whoop. And it's like, I don't believe for a second any iteration of Luke would ever do that. Because if you think about how important a lightsaber is, even if you've lost faith in the Force and the Jedi and everything, if you genuinely believe that, no one is going to grab it and just throw it behind you. Realistically, what you do is you either give it back, you say, I don't want this, chuck it on the floor and walk away.
I will challenge that later on.
Yeah, please do. Please challenge me. That's why I like talking to you. But I just don't think, I don't know anyone who has ever thrown something behind them unless they're specifically trying to be funny. And Luke isn't trying to be funny.
No,
Rian Johnson is.
It's not, very serious. I don't think, I apologize for interrupting you, but I didn't feel that the intention behind the scene or the cue was to laugh. The cue was like to be disoriented and confused and angry, perhaps. Like, wait, Luke, why is he doing that? Because he clearly got a reaction. I suspect major part of why people dislike and feel so two-sided about this movie is specifically Luke. And then when you dislike something so viscerally and emotionally, when you internalize that, then you kind of rationalize the rest of the film why you dislike it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I just think that Luke as a whole, I like, apart from the bit where he drinks the green milk and then it dribbles in his beard, that once again, that's a bit I don't understand why it's there. But like Luke as a character, I love Luke in The Last Jedi. I know we get into it and things, but I love Luke. I just think that moment in itself, it just didn't work for me. If he just dropped it on the floor, fine. But I think The Last Jedi, I think the biggest thing it suffers from is the fact that it's constantly trying to pull one out from underneath the audience. It's trying to constantly tell the audience, you don't know what's going on. As soon as you think you do.
Subvert expectations.
That's the exact word I was looking for. Thank you. Subverting expectations. And the thing is, I like that with the plot. I like what happens with Snoke. I like what happens at the end. I love The Last Jedi. I think it's probably my favorite of the three. But you don't... Just because you want to do it with the plot doesn't mean that every 15 minutes you have to do something and then suddenly change it. I know The Force Awakens was a bit too safe and everything's very predictable. Oh, there's another Death Star. What are they going to do? Well, they're going to blow it up. Obviously, that's as soon as you find out it's there, it's going to be gone. Whereas The Last Jedi, the thing that my favorite part about The Last Jedi is unpredictable. But the part that annoys me the most about The Last Jedi is it's trying so hard all the time to not be predictable that at certain moments it's just like this specific element isn't necessary. And I have some thoughts about Leia, which I'll leave to the end, but that's a similar element as well. But what about yourself with that sort of thematically? How do you think it feels comparatively?
I just want to quickly add to what you were saying. I think that what you were, remind me what your first a couple of lines were there. I was going to add something really interesting.
With the subverting expectations, and he does it every 15 minutes.
Right. I feel that it's clearly there, and it felt a little bit too contrived, because when you look at films that kind of like tension and they hold you throughout the whole movie, a perfect example would be Batman: The Dark Knight. You don't know which way it's going to go with Joker, but it feels that the story is crafted so expertly. It doesn't feel like in each specific scene he's going for a desired effect. It's seamless. When you watch it, right, because of all the beats, because that's how you craft a film, shot by shot, scene by scene, you get to that, you build that momentum. I would agree that in The Last Jedi, one of the things that the movie suffers from is that Rian Johnson trying to subvert too much expectations, and a lot of it kind of like swims on the surface. It doesn't feel layered enough. The movie doesn't feel like it was cooked enough in the pre-production process before they got and filmed it. It feels like, I need to do this over here. I need to do, and it feels very structured in that sense. Very Hollywood, very template-like, which I don't like. To compare the two, I enjoyed, first of all, I disagree with people who say that Rian Johnson specifically went and sort of like in almost malicious way sidelined everything that J.J. Abrams built and completely altered it. I think he took what was there and he logically tried to extend things in what he tried to do in an unexpected and interesting way. And I think in major parts he succeeded, and in some he didn't. But I really enjoyed the tonal difference between the films, where The Force Awakens felt like we're back to the adventure. We're back to the basics. It's basic, very, very simplistic message of, hey, you got to believe in yourself. Even if you don't know who your parents are, or like Finn, even if you ran from the First Order, you got to take charge and you help the good guys. It's about friendships and camaraderie. And I think that was the most interesting and innovative and fresh aspect of The Force Awakens, that trio. the new cast, the new people, not looking behind the shoulder, not the old cast that everybody tried to find throughout this entire trilogy, and only got snippets of the legacy characters, which amount to not a lot, honestly. Mm-hmm. With The Last Jedi, what I really enjoyed Rian Johnson doing is that amidst all of the film's flaws, I think he majorly succeeded in introducing new themes. Like, hey, you got to learn from your mistakes. You got to learn from failure. You got to confront your fears. And sometimes life doesn't provide easy answers. I absolutely love the scene, which we could elaborate on, of Rey going into her dark pit and confronting these multiple images of herself and how her actions are rippling. It almost gives her idea of no matter what you do, the effects will be felt throughout generations because you are your own person. And remember how she sees the two images of her parents resolving into one, and then it's her. There's so much symbology there. There's so much. There's that nuance that The Last Jedi introduces that The Force Awakens for me didn't have. And I think, perhaps that's what each film's jewel is. One is more simple. One is like this, a little bit more nuanced. And I don't think one is necessarily better than the other. It's that the fact that they work differently. And I think the reason that Chris Nolan's Batman trilogy works exceptionally well is because each consecutive film didn't try to up the one before. Obviously, it's coming from the mind of one, filmmaker, but he didn't try to repeat the magic. What he tried to do, if the first movie is the origin story, then the second movie is a detective story. And then the third film is like this epic, classic literature, the tale of two cities, kind of like human question kind of like story, right? Completely different films. And I think that was a scenario with the first Star Wars sequels.
Yeah, and I want to add in here as well with The Force Awakens, and I think The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, I think they are both equally good films. I enjoy them both very closely. In fact, I did my rewatch. I generally rewatch the Star Wars films probably twice a year, I'd say. And it was only on the last two watches where Force Awakens, Last Jedi just bumped up just a bit, because for me, they're very, very, very close. I think Rise of Skywalker is a bit lower than both. I think they're both excellent films in their own right, but I think one is very safe, one is very easy, one is very, it's the open adventure. It's very, almost everyone likes The Force Awakens. It's hard not to. The biggest critiques is the plot is basically the same as the other films. If you take that out, generally speaking, there's not many big gripes. With The Last Jedi, I think that the way they went thematically, I loved it. I kind of describe it as, Force Awakens did this kind of going forward, and then Last Jedi kind of did that a little bit, and I was like, cool, that's where they're going. And then The Rise of Skywalker went, nope, boop. And that's my problem, is the back to it. I'm fine with films going in a certain direction. I think like the Dark Knight trilogy, as you say, you can kind of go, it looked like it was going that way, and then it kind of went like that, and it went on its own journey. That's fine, as long as it kind of sticks where it's going. And I don't think, and I agree with you, I don't think Rian Johnson undid anything from JJ. I think he only added to it.
Yeah.
I do think that JJ took away from that when he made The Rise of Skywalker, but that's for the next episode.
Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about the action style, in episode 8, and also compare it to 7, because what I'm realizing is we're not talking about each movie in isolation. We're talking about a trilogy, honestly. But here in this particular podcast, we're highlighting, episode 8. Let's talk about the action style in 7 and 8, particularly pertaining to lightsaber duels and space combat. You had something like Poe's flying, right, in both films. In the Last Jedi, you have Haldo maneuver, which I know you wanted to talk about. We have Finn on Phasma action, right? We have the throne room, hotly debated, hotly discussed. And of course, we have the great ground battle, the Salt Planet, where all the fans, shed their tears, specifically on that planet. Talk about the different stylistic difference of action, which you personally prefer more.
I think I prefer Last Jedi. Action-wise, to be honest with you, I think The Last Jedi is better in almost every way, as in action-wise. Aside from, I think that the lightsaber duel between Finn, Rey, and Kylo, that scene is my favorite lightsaber scene in the whole of the sequel trilogies. I think the throne room scene, I think, is arguably better when it comes to stylistically. I think when I first saw that, I was completely blown away. The second it ended, I was like, whoa, that changed me. But I think that upon numerous rewatches, I think that the the weight behind and there's so many elements of the Kylo, Finn, and Kylo, Rey, and Finn scene. When we spoke in the last one, Kylo Ren is bleeding. He's trying to fight someone who's awakening in the Force, someone else who's not necessarily Force sensitive, but's probably been trained with these things. Yeah. So I prefer that lightsaber battle generally. But if you take away that one battle from Force Awakens, I think every other element of the action scenes in The Last Jedi is better for me. And you bring up the action scene at the end on the salt planet of Crate, and I just think action scenes, a lot of it is choreography, but also a lot of it is what the audience can see and what they can feel. And I think that Rian Johnson, from when you see the throne scene and it starts and you've got like 5 seconds of slow motion just as the Praetorian Guards come in, that's a brilliant stylistic choice. When you've got the salt planet and everything is all white, but when the salt breaks and you've got the ships going, red is spraying behind them, that looks incredible. And I just think that Rian Johnson really understands how to make an action scene look amazing and have the audience can see clearly what's going on. Yeah. Because although I love like the Marvel movies, like I love the MCU, I think a lot of the movies are great. Some of them a bit samey, but I really enjoy them. For the most of them, the action scenes are often the weakest parts if it's not all CGI, because it's like cut, and you can't really see what's going on. You just kind of see someone's punching someone. Oh, and then Cap flew that way. Clearly, he's the one who got hit.
They say when you have an action cut like this, it's the director who doesn't know how to shoot action.
Exactly. Whereas you watch other films, you watch like The Raid or The Raid 2 or any of the sort of martial arts films, and and they don't cut. They just, it's like, here's the thing. Old Boys are probably a film that people may have seen more, the original one. You've got that sort of hallway scene, and it's just, here it is. Daredevil's the same on Netflix. When you've got good choreography, you don't necessarily need to keep cutting to change angles. You can just kind of have the camera there and have things happen. And although obviously with the Praetorian Guard throne scene and stuff, there's a lot more, there are cuts and things and you change angles. It doesn't feel like they're cutting to hide things. It looks like they're changing angles to show more. And I think that Rian Johnson really understands how to make an action scene look good.
Yeah, interesting. What about before I take the turn from you and answer my own question, because I wrote them. How the maneuver, why is it being mentioned? Why are memes being made? Why some people love it? What's the story there? Is it a significant action sequence, or what's up with that?
I think, looking objectively, as I've got a media studies A-level, so I know a small amount about things. I'm joking. I bet I don't know that much, but I do have a media studies A-level. But with action scenes, with the Holden maneuver, I think that is arguably the most cinematograph. Speaking in a cinema sense and trying to be critical, I think that is one of the most accomplished scenes in Star Wars. From the moment you see it happening and everything's all going crazy, like the resistance all dying and this is happening and Holder's just there, what's she gonna do? And then you kind of figure out, you see her steer the ship, and the First Order are like, oh, don't worry, she's doing something. And by the time they realize, and you've got Finn and Rose are there with Phasma about to execute them and stuff, and everything's all building up to this crescendo, and you've got Kylo and Rey using the Force, trying to pull Anakin's lightsaber and stuff. It's all building and building. And then she activates hyperspace. It goes, silence. And then you just see, and it's just for about 5-10 seconds, there's no noise. And you just see these things in space. And you just have a moment to absorb what's just happened. And you don't get that in many films. You don't get that in Star Wars very much. You don't get that many action adventure films or many Hollywood films. Just a moment, just to really absorb what's just happened. And I just think when you see that happen, and when you're in the cinema, especially for the first time, it's like the breath comes out your lungs. You're like, whoa, I've not seen anything really like this in these sorts of films. I didn't expect that level of it. And I think that scene is absolutely amazing. I love it. And I want to clarify as well, part of my other podcast is trying to explain things and plot holes and things. The ship she's on is the Radis. It's a Mon Calamari ship, and it has a specific experimental shielding, which means that when she activated hyperspace and hit the First Order ship and it splintered, apart from, I think, one time where it happens in Endor in the comics somewhere, aside from that, it doesn't happen again in Star Wars. It's not something one can just constantly do, because people always go, why don't the Resistance do that all the time? It's like, because it doesn't always work like that. That was meant to be like a 1 in a million
So
thing.
they explained it away, basically.
Yeah. But I just think visually, and as just in that one film, I think I absolutely love that scene. I thought the lack of music is so powerful, and I think less is more sometimes.
I agree.
And I think the Holder maneuver really, really articulated that.
Yeah. I'm going to sound more critical than I am of a fan, even though, I enjoy both films. I knew from the start that I liked The Last Jedi the most, and I sort of had a feeling after watching the Rise of the Skywalker trailer that the third film is not going to be as interesting to me as Episode 8.
100%.
I honestly was largely underwhelmed by all of action in this trilogy.
Okay.
I feel that most of it was very forgettable, and there was very, very few scenes which kind of felt like they belonged in that era, and they were so unique and interesting that you want to revisit. And one of the few examples that I would bring is it was sort of interesting to see a kind of like visceral and unrefined European style fencing between Kylo and Ren and Finn. Kylo Ren, Finn, and then Rey joins in. That was interesting and unrefined, but ultimately forgettable. The throne room, as you said, was just visually arresting. I think that's the winning points for that scene is the cinematography, not necessarily the action. Because suddenly Rey knows how to challenge some of the best fighters in there, which I don't believe she's a Mary Sue, but this scene was kind of like tailored around her. And all the Praetorian guards are there, and they're doing all this crazy stuff. And suddenly they're a team, and they understand.
I would say, sorry to interrupt, but I would say, although I do agree to a degree, upon the rewatch recently, what I actually noticed is Rey actually only goes against one Praetorian guard at a time normally. Whenever she goes against two, she's always like...
It's still too much.
She's like too much. When you watch Kylo, he's fighting 2, 3, 4 at a time, and he's winning. So I think that scene, although... it is, I agree, Rey is maybe probably a bit should be more underwhelmed. Right. When you watch it, she is only normally fighting 1 or 2, and Kylo's fighting a lot more. And I think that somewhat kind of shows how Kylo is a bit more trained, and she's still a bit more, because she's panicky. She gets like the thing held at her, and although she's clever with the Force and she, does some cool moves, she's actually on the ropes and almost dies quite a few times, whereas Kylo Ren doesn't really have that. So that's just, I want to chip in there.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. It's just, it felt too much to me, and it was just cinematically, as you said, beautiful, but ultimately forgettable to me. Thin on Phasma as well. There wasn't any sense of redemption or reward in that Episode 8 duel between the two. I think she was just a throwaway character, and that fight didn't amount to any kind of emotional buildup. It was just very, very forgettable. The only two scenes between Episode 7 and 8 that I enjoyed, in Episode 7, surprisingly, that when Rey and Finn are on Jakku and they're fleeing from these TIE fighters, that Falcon chase scene was just, for me, phenomenal. I was like, oh, dude, because, I don't know, it's just simple and it just works. Flying in and outside of the, Imperial Star Destroyer, and how, like, every angle is accentuated and all the camera angles show how Rey knows how to behave herself in the cockpit. She knows how to fly. We don't know how, but she clearly knows how to do that. And surprisingly, in Episode 8, my biggest gripe is that this entire trilogy, and specifically Episode 8, failed to deliver that sober war-themed kind of like military stratagems. It never feels like there's war theater. It's just cool stuff happening on the screen. But one scene that was small and bittersweet was the little fencing between Rey and Luke.
Oh, yeah. I love that bit. It's too short.
It's too short, but that's the sweetness of it. When he demonstrates to her that in his twilight years, girl, who the heck is he disarms her without a lightsaber. It's like, oh my God. And I think that's also partially the reason I say bittersweet is the disappointment is that people wanted to see Luke in his prime, which I don't believe this movie needed. It's not about him. It's about him passing the torch. But just the potential of seeing Luke deliver that full swing, like my friend William, his biggest gripe with the film is that when he confronts Ben, right, on Crate, he says, Luke should have been there. He should have made that sacrifice. It's like, he's a coward, he flees, and then he tries to come back through the vision, and he just rickrolls everyone. It doesn't add gravity to the scene, and that's why he doesn't like it. But for me, I understood his intellectual line where Ryan Johnson is taking the film later on in the movie. But in this particular moment, just Mark Hamill himself doing that kind of stuff, it brought me back to these kung fu movies that I used to watch, like from the 70s and 80s, from the Shaw Brothers collection of Hong Kong cinema with Gordon Liu and Jackie Chan and all this stuff, showing the Grand Master, his disciple, what he's capable of. That was a crying achievement for me. And then the rest of the scenes, the rest of the space battles that was really looking forward to me, were delivered in the form of Rogue One. That movie, to me, outclassed every other Star Wars film in terms of space combat.
And also military stuff. I think on Scarif, when they're running on the beaches and you're watching the ships land, and that is, I agree. I think that's some of the best military action you see in all of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I just want to add to the point where you said about Phasma and Finn. When I was thinking about it, when I was thinking about the action scenes, I was thinking about the bigger set pieces. That Finn and Phasma scene, I will say, one of the worst parts of The Last Jedi is the fact that they just kill off Phasma, because it was like, she looks so cool. Oh my God, in The Force Awakens, that's cool. Oh, she fights Finn. How's this going to go? And there's like, oh, she's dead. You're like, so underused. She should have at least survived to Rise of Skywalker. She was such a cool character. So yeah, I just want to add that in.
I want to push on and start talking about the meaty stuff, the stuff that I think no two fans will completely agree on. And that's the interesting stuff. You talk about, pick your brain, and hear what your thoughts are on these characters. I wanted to talk about the personal journeys of our cast. And obviously, I want to begin with our main three protagonists, right? Rey, Poe, and Finn. How did you feel their journeys fared in The Last Jedi? And did you enjoy them? Which was your favorite character? And I do want to throw Rose in there as well, because she was supposed to be, this fourth character, almost like Lando Calrissian, somebody who joins, our major cast. What did you feel about those characters? What were their journeys like? Which one resonated with you the most?
I think my favorite part of The Last Jedi is my favorite parts, rather. Pretty much every scene with Rey. Because for me, it felt like Luke on Dagobah in Empire Strikes Back. It felt like someone learning about the Force who didn't know about the Force, but not the exact same thing that was told previously. I like how Luke's interpretation of the Force, it builds off what Yoda says in Dagobah, and it builds off things. And he says, I'm just going to give you 3 lessons. I'm just going to do this. And the bit where she sat on the rock and he's like, feel the, feel the cold, the light and the dark, it's all about balance. That's the point, and all these things. And kind of, he even mentions in brief about the prequel era Jedi didn't have it right. So I think with Rey and her training and stuff, I loved every moment of her training. I love that element of it, someone growing in power and learning about things. And I love things about the Force. The Force is my favorite element of all of Star Wars. So although I love Rogue One as a film, it's incredible, but my favorite thing that really connects with me to Star Wars is the Force. So Rey's journey, thought that was excellent. I love how she's kind of, she's got all this power, she doesn't know how to use it. And then by the end, there's that scene where she lifts the rocks, and it's a nod to sort of, Luke says to Rey, it's not all about lifting rocks, and then it kind of is. I like that little on the nose thing. With Poe, just in the films, because I'm going to sound a bit of a douche now, but like in the comics and stuff, Poe already learns the lessons that he learned in The Last Jedi. So he already was a flyboy. He was a bit too extreme. He gets himself in bad situations. He winds himself back. He learns from his mistakes. And Last Jedi starts, it's like, no, he didn't. It's like, okay. But just looking at the film, I like the journey. I like him growing as a character. He seems to be learning things. He, is kind of Leia kind of passing the torch to him, being like, in a sense of, you can be the best pilot. You can go in a ship and blow things up, but that isn't everything. You can't win every battle. You have to learn and figure things out. And I think that's what Leia did very well in the films that she's in, trying to figure out alternate ways. Even that first scene you see her in the New Hope, when, you've got Han and you've got Luke and you've got Chewie, they're like, what are we going to do? And she's like, garbage chute. She thinks outside the box. She's always kind of one step ahead of her own colleagues, which is why I like this character. And then, so I love Pose as well. Finn, unfortunately, is a character. I said it in the last episode. From Force Awakens, loved Finn. Last Jedi, I like Finn. Rise of Skywalker, he is the character I think that suffers the most in the sequel trilogy. He had the most potential. You see him holding his own a bit against a wounded Kylo Ren, and he takes a sacrifice for Rey. You just go, that's amazing. Then in Last Jedi, 90% of his dialogue, I'm being over the top here, but 90% of his dialogue is him asking about Rey. And it's like, there's more to him than wanting to know what's going on with Rey. Obviously, his first dialogue is, where's Rey? And then it cuts to what Rey's doing, which I like. But everything else is basically, oh, what's going on with Rey? Where's Rey? What's happening with Rey? Rey will come and save us. And it's just like, it's more about than just Rey.
Yeah.
And then I'm not the biggest fan of Rose in a sense of, I don't hate her. I think the actress did a great job. Anyone who is horrible to that actress, I hate you. She does not deserve any of the hate.
And she's stunning, man. Kelly Marie Tran, she's gorgeous.
She's a beautiful woman. Yeah. She's really good at acting, and her character, the way she portrayed her character, wasn't the problem. If you have an issue with her character, it's the writing, which I agree with somewhat. I don't think she's a bad character. I think she's not fleshed out enough, really. I think the problem is she just had a couple of lines that were just a bit crap. It was just like just a bit pithy. I would describe it as some of the dialogue, like her last thing when she says to Finn, you know, we don't win with love, we win with hate. We don't win with hate, we win with love. You know, and then she kisses him, and it's just like. Ugh. But with their journey, I like Rose in that, and I was excited to see more of her and her develop more as a character, even if she didn't hit the marks for me in that film, because I had no expectation. I was like, oh, she's cool. With Finn, I just kind of felt like Finn for the most of the film was just kind of there for the ride. Like everything he did in Canto Bight with Rose was kind of instigated by Rose. She said about the Fathiers, the horse things. She mentioned, oh, look, the casino's not everything it is. So she is like, here's another perspective. She's the one that kind of has the idea to, you know, let the Fathiers out and let's go off and, you know, run off into the distance. She's the one who takes the saddle off that last Fathier, who then runs off. So she's the one who does everything for him. Finn's just there. He's the one who's really rude to Benicio del Toro's character, DJ. She's not nice to him, but he's the one who's rude. So it just seems like everything Finn does doesn't help anyone. And everything Rose does is actually moral and because she's a good person. Finn's trying to run away. He's trying to do all these things. He hasn't got the hero that he feels like. He's just trying to go for Rey. So I feel like, in short, Poe's great. Rey's great. Rose is all right. I think she could have been built on more. But Finn, for me, is really where the three main characters, he wasn't utilized enough. He didn't even need to be there. And that's the problem. You want him to be there. You want him to contribute. And realistically, he didn't, to me, add anything. I want to hear your thoughts on this, because I wonder if you agree with me on certain of these elements.
Like yourself, I'm also mostly attracted about the Force and Force themes and the Jedi in the Star Wars. And to me, it was crucial that I connect with the lead character, which is Rey, which is, to me, a reincarnation of Luke Skywalker.
Yes.
She is Luke, female version for a new generation of fans to enjoy.
First
and I think
draft.
Daisy really, exactly. And Daisy really, I think, completely captures and encapsulates that innocence and a teenager, really, a young person stepping into a larger world.
The wonder.
World of, exactly. And learning about herself. And I felt that her evolution justifies the whole movie. With all its flaws, with all the things, the problems I have with it. Guys, surprise, I love The Last Jedi and I still find a lot of flaws in it. That's how you can enjoy your movies. But I think most of the stuff with her was very interesting. Her self-image, how she sees her, and that shift of perspective from, hey, who my parents are, to what is my place in this? Look, I need your guidance. If you're not going to give it to me, I'm going to go and ask it from Ben, or he's going to tempt me, or something like this. I really enjoyed it. The only thing with Rey, I felt that she's not a Mary Sue at all. She has literally the same amount of training time on screen as Luke does. Perhaps even more. She trains with a lightsaber. Luke doesn't. And fans don't question it for a moment. That's why I think it's irrational how we respond to movies. We react emotionally, and then we build our rationale around it. Why this movie is terrible and should be like a D- on Rotten Tomatoes or something like this. I felt it works mostly, but I felt she was just a bit too overpowered. He rushed things just a little bit in the excitement of having a cool scene. Which I guess that's what it amounts to. That's what it was. Okay. With Poe, I enjoyed his interaction with Leia, how he's Leia's protege, and he does grow and develop as somebody who takes the lead. He takes the charge. He turns around. He asks Leia, they're following me now. She's like, yeah, take it away. I'm not going to be here forever. It's like, go. That was interesting. But I want to touch here a moment, which a bigger question we'll discuss later on, and it's feminism. And unfortunately, this is one movie that doesn't escape its time and the time frame it's made in, and the outside influences that Hollywood movies always had. Original Star Wars, any movie you take, it's always influenced by the current social environment and social temperature, so to speak. And the TLJ is no different from that. And I felt that in an effort to bring diversity and make women stand as powerful characters And any Star Wars Legends fan will tell you, like myself, that Star Wars had plenty of strong women all the freaking time. They weren't just as highlighted as they are today. But today, perhaps in a very conscious and honest way trying to do it, they're overdoing it a bit. And from that perspective, I felt like Poe's character suffers when he's grounded and when Haldo has absolutely no reasonable explanation why she's withholding strategic information from somebody who is your flyboy, who is your go-getter, who is the guy who defeats, the bad guys, and he delivers them from the clutches of the First Order in the beginning of the film. Why would you not reveal this information to him? Why? Because he's a hot shot? Because he's hot? Han was hot-headed too. Nobody treated him like a boy, like a kid. To me, Haldo felt like a soccer mom. She's like reprimanding him. It's like, oh, you're not going to fly anymore. I'm like, what is this? This is confusing, it's disorienting, and it doesn't do justice to the character. Finn also suffers greatly from that same reason. She's treated like an idiot by Rose, unfortunately. And it's not Rose's fault. I think, once again, it's a genuine impulse to make women relevant and strong, and I'm all for that, but not at the expense of the characters. I felt that Finn and Rose don't accomplish anything in this film. Anything they're set out to do, they fail. Rose's saving grace was a cantabite, which I don't feel that it's a throwaway scene. Maybe it could have been a lot shorter, but the little tiny, environmental message and, preserving animals and, she wanted to step on this, bureaucratic, weapon-mongering kind of society. It kind of makes sense, and I liked that. And I wanted to see it more in the film. But towards the end, Rose's character and her role was not justified, where we have this extremely tense moment where Finn is about to sacrifice himself. And I felt it would have been such a daring move. I believe for a second he's going to die. It would have been such a daring and chancy kind of like filmmaking choice to kill him off and perhaps Rose take his place. Instead, she comes in and she subverts his moment of glory. She's like, you're not going anywhere. And then the problem I have with her speech is that not what she says, but the context of it. Take him to safety, get to your base, and then you tell him, like, hey, dummy, don't respond emotionally. We still have a battle to win, right? We got to save what we love. She's saying it in like a combat zone. I'm like, yeah, like a PC message is all nice and cool. We're trying to win a war here. Because as soon as she leaves, guess what the good guys do? They're out there to kill First Order dudes. Like, what are you talking about? Like mixed signals. I think it's the heart of the film was in the right place, but delivery was not there. So to me, this is some of the flaws of the characters reflect upon my overall enjoyment of the film. But thankfully, Rey and the next characters I want to discuss with were completely on point. And now I want to talk about Kylo, Luke, and Leia. Obviously, we have a very, very strong dynamic between all three. Kylo is trying to kill his mom, but he doesn't dare do that after what he committed, his patricide, and then connection between Luke and Ben, right, Kylo Ren, and then the connection between Luke and Leia. Discuss that triangle. How did that make you feel in the film?
I mean, I thought it was very expertly done. I love that part, and I think that one thing about this film with Kylo especially, like I think with these films, although I think Rey is the main character, I think that Kylo is like just below her in a sense. Like for me, the trilogy is about the two of them. It's about the two opposing things. And in a similar way, the original trilogy, although Darth Vader doesn't have half the screen time, it's kind of about Luke and Darth Vader. And in this way, it's Rey and Kylo Ren. And the way they go about their things are slightly different, but it's thematically kind of similar. I think that with Kylo and Luke, I absolutely loved the flashbacks. I love it when it flashes and then it changes a bit and then it changes again. I love the whole idea that people perceive their own pasts in a different way to other people, because that's how things are. You know, how many times you're telling a story with a mate of yours and they're like, that's not how it happened. It happened like this. And you're like, yeah, that's like a jokey way of kind of explaining it. But you know what I mean? Like that sort of, I love going back to the same scene and seeing it from a different perspective, seeing other additional things in it and whatnot. I love that element. So, and the whole dynamic where, you know, the legend of Luke, you see him in the original trilogy and he's meant to be this, you know, top tier guy. And he's like, you know, he's kind of infallible in a way. And then you see him make the ultimate mistake which inadvertently causes Kylo Ren. And it kind of everything starts to make sense of why Luke put himself on this island and like all these things. He did his biggest failure. His greatest success was turning Darth Vader back to the light. That was his greatest thing. No one thought it could ever be done, and he did it. And then to even him back out, his biggest failure is creating basically another Darth Vader and inadvertently causing everything that his entire hero life that was, in the original trilogy kind of prevented or solved, he then basically caused. So I like that element of it. I thought Luke and Leia, I like the elements that you get to see. I'll talk about Leia's space bit in a minute, but like with Luke and Leia specifically, their connection, I like that it's subtle. I like they can feel each other in the Force. I like that when Luke says his goodbye to Leia and he like kisses her on the head, even though he's the hologram and thing. I really like that part. So I like that element. With the Leia and Ren bit, I thought that once again it's subverting expectations, but I thought this is another example of where Rian Johnson did it well. You've got Kylo Ren, he's flying towards the ship, he's already destroyed lots of things, and he's thinking, his thumb's on the trigger, and he's like, I don't know if I can kill my mum. I don't know if I can do it. And you can see him, and she's there, and you can
Adam Driver, man.
Oh, he is top tier. I love him. And you've got, Carrie Fisher staring, and you can see the connection there. And then obviously one of his co-pilot, the other TIE fighter, does it anyway. And it's like, oh.
Yeah.
But I think that the triad of connection is so good because Leia hopes, it's kind of like Leia's hoping for the best in Kylo. Kylo can't do that final thing and turn to the dark side because of the good from Leia. But simultaneously, Luke can't recover from this mistake he made, which caused Kylo Ren to go the other way. So you've kind of got Luke's the catalyst for Kylo's turn, even though Luke was meant to be the person to teach him how to be a good Force user, while simultaneously Leia, someone who chose to step away from the Force, who we've always known has had a bit of Force sensitivity, but until Rise of Skywalker and in this film a bit, doesn't really touch on it that much. It's kind of hinted at. When you've got her who chooses to step away from that, doesn't want to be a Jedi, she wants to be a good in different ways. She's the good Force that holds Kylo back from going too far over the edge. And obviously that's shown in Rise of Skywalker as well. But I think that the way it did it, it was so expertly done. And I just want to say that the Kylo Ren and Rey, obviously it's named, I think, in Rise of Skywalker, the Dyad of the Force. I absolutely love their connection, where you get to see them talking, communicating when no one else is there. I think that's one of my favorite story elements of The Last Jedi. I thought, what a brilliantly clever way to have two characters connect and interact, and over each interaction slowly understand each other more without them having to be in the same place, without having to write some crazy plot of them being stuck together without fighting, but having it in a way where initially they can't harm each other. Because the first thing Rey does when it first happened, she pulls out a gun and tries to shoot him immediately. It doesn't work, so she resorts to talking to him. And that's how they get to common ground. And I think that both Kylo Ren interacting with Rey and Kylo Ren's interactions with Luke and Leia, very, very well done. I think they all work well. What were your sort of thoughts on that?
I want to actually begin where you ended with Rey and Kylo Ren. I also absolutely love, first of all, as a Star Wars nerd who likes to, dig through details, I really enjoyed it on the technical aspect. Like, hey, that's a new Force power. And the fact that when he talks to her and then she's in the rain on Acto and he stops talking to her and his hand is dripping.
Yeah.
So it shows some physical properties, how they actually, so Luke could have been there physically for a moment when he kisses Leia, right? Maybe Jedi can attain that level of power. I said, what a cool new power to see. That's something that we see in the Legends New Jedi Order. When Ben Solo is able to force walk. It's one of the abilities that he has. That was interesting. What I really loved and what really made me enjoy their last parting kiss in Rise of the Skywalker is that every second they were on screen together, I believed, first of all, the romantic feelings they kind of like harboring for one another, but also the sexual tension. I believe that Adam Driver is portraying sort of like a bit of a younger guy than he is. He's like, Kylo Ren, I would say, is like early mid-20s. And she's like a 19, 20 years old, somewhere there in the ballpark. And they're these two young people that are stuck in this larger world and they're trying to find their course, right? Their identity, who they are. And obviously they're frustrated and their family doesn't understand them. So they're orphaned in a way as well. There's a lot of ground to connect with each other. Like there's a lot of reasons for that. So that was really interesting to me. That worked really well. I really enjoyed that. When it comes to Kylo Ren and Luke Skywalker, phenomenal. For me, I interpreted Kylo as somebody who is already too far gone in The Force Awakens. That's why he commits patricide. And that's why in episode 8, he ascends as a villain. In The Force Awakens, he is just wounded boy. He's like this little puppy that Snoke orders around. And here, I was not sad to see Snoke go anyway, because to me, he was like a throwaway character in The Force Awakens. Here, he became intriguing and interesting. He was almost like the Emperor in the original films. You don't know Emperor's background. You don't question it. You don't ask for it. All you know that he's badass on the throne and he's trying to get more power. That's what Snoke is here. I don't think talking about how he came to be would have amped the character up in any meaningful way. So he's there, he's doing his thing, and Kylo Ren is like, and he twists the lightsaber and kills it, and boom! It's Kylo killing someone. I'm like, my man, now you're menacing. Now you're dangerous. Now you're unpredictable. Now you're the badass I was looking for in episode 7. Very interesting character growth, character moment there. And his connection to Luke is that I felt like the tragedy of Luke Skywalker was his hubris. That he thought he could convert this kid who is already a rotten apple. He was given into Luke's care as somebody who's already broken. And there's nothing Luke could have done to redeem him. Because remember that little dialogue that Leia and Han have is like, it was too late. We couldn't do anything for him. And that's why we gave him to Luke. And that's why he felt abandoned. They only amplified the problem by a mother tearing her son away from her breast and giving him to this guy who's supposed to train them, So that was the tragedy of Luke Skywalker. And just Luke himself, his growth, his, introspective moments where he looks into himself, and his teachable moment with Yoda, which he's like, okay, I'm still stuck in my ways. She's supposed to grow beyond me. I'm supposed to impart this knowledge to her. I'm not supposed to tell her what to do. It's her world. It's her journey now. And Luke kind of like settling into it was fantastic. And to me, when we knew that Carrie Fisher passed away, and that moment where he comes to console her and sit down with her, one of the most touching moments. First of all, I love Luke and Leia's scene in The Return of the Jedi. That theatrical scene. It almost looks like a theater stage, and Mark Hamill delivering these fantastic lines to her, explaining the Skywalker family. It's just so beautifully done. I felt that Rian Johnson was able to strike gold twice in this movie. When he brings Yoda back, I felt like a 6-year-old.
And the puppet Yoda as well, which I was very happy about. And not only a
puppet Yoda, because they also had puppet Yoda in Phantom Menace, but here he looked like it looked like a scene that was recorded during the filming of Episode 6 and put into this film. It felt spectacular, and what Yoda said there to me extended his knowledge, extended his wisdom, and grew even him as a character. What he tells to Luke, and like he knocks him over the head with that spiritual cane. I was like, oh my God, Jedi could do this? What are the possibilities? Are they going to revive Luke in episode 9? What's going to happen next? It's interesting.
Yeah.
And, and I felt that Luke and Leia's relationship there, how he opens himself back to the Force and he starts feeling her. He's like, Leia. And that's the moment she wakes up. I was like, oh my God, this is so beautifully done. That whole triangle, Kylo Ren and Rey, Luke Skywalker and Ben Solo, even when he tells them at the end, it's like, kid, he teaches him in the most sincere and nonviolent way that a Jedi could possibly teach a student. His nephew, somebody he loves, not his enemy. That's why he's not there with the sword hacking away at his nephew, right? And he says at the end, see you around, kid. Kind of like passing on his father's words, like, hey, make up with everybody. Accept the mistake that you've done with your father. It was like beautifully done stuff,
Yeah, and I like how, like, with the Force projection, once again, that's another cool Force power brought into the canon. I'm pretty certain that was in Legends as well, that exact thing, as you say. Yeah. And it's like, I really like that being brought into the canon. I love the fact that Luke's projection was his younger self, the one that is the thing that caused Kylo to turn. That's what he turned into when he's got the shaved beard and things. And I love, because that's the thing that would trigger Kylo Ren the most, to distract him the most.
Yeah, I love that as well.
Yeah, and that scene, like, this is another thing where I do like a lot of elements of the humor in The Last Jedi. I think There's a scene which I don't like much, is where I liked it the first time, and every time I watch it, I like it less, which is when Rey is told, I'll reach out with the Force, and then she puts her hand out, and then he tickles it with a leaf. When I first saw that, I was cracked up. And every time I see it now, I'm just like, this is just a joke that didn't need to be in the film, really. It kind of ruins the feel a little bit. However, the bit I really like, that Megan doesn't like very much, but I love, is the bit where Kylo sees Luke there. And he does something which I think doesn't happen enough with villains. He's got a million guns there. He doesn't say, I'm going to go down and fight him with a sword. He's like, got all these guns. Let's kill him. Let's just shoot. And you're like, what? And it all happens. And you're like, and when you're first watching it, you're like, is he going to have a force bubble around him? Is he going to teleport? Is he going to deflect them back? Is he going to be gone? Unlikely, but could happen. And then, straight out, he just walks out. It's like, and you're like, how powerful is Luke? How does he do this? And it's like, and then once Kylo's like, I can't shoot him, I have to go down to see him. Rather than, I hate it when villains do this, and it triggers me so much, where they're like, yes, Mr. Bond, I've got a gun here, but instead I'm going to dangle you over a thing of piranhas. It's like, just shoot him. Just shoot him. And Kylo actually did it, and obviously it didn't work. So that's why he had to go down. So I love that element. I just want to throw in there that the whole Luke being a force projection, I love that. And I also loved his little nod to C-3PO. Little tiny thing, but where he just looks at 3PO and he's like, the master, and he just gives him a wink and keeps walking. I was like, I like that. That's a nice little thing. I think I love Luke in The Last Jedi. I think that the way they set him up in The Force Awakens, he literally says it in the film, I didn't put myself on the most unfindable place to then just light up my laser sword and fight the First Order and beat them all. He's like, I came here for a reason, and it has to be a good enough reason to not want to be found, especially someone like Luke. And a lot of people are like, oh, they ruined Luke. And it's like, but if Rey just showed up and went, oh, your son, your nephew that went bad, he's being really bad. You know, the First Order that you already knew about, you know that they're doing all those bad things. And Luke goes, really? Oh my God, you're right. I'm so sorry. Let's go and fight him. That wouldn't make any sense. That would be undoing The Force Awakens. And that's why, although I too would love to see Luke at his full power, I'd love to see him.
Everyone would.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that you're not the biggest fan of this element, but obviously The Mandalorian, it happens. And I think they're inevitably going to do some sort of Luke series, probably Sebastian Stan. And maybe then we'll get that kind of level that we want to see of Luke's power and stuff. But obviously that's a whole nother conversation. But Luke and Kylo are two of my favorite elements of The Last Jedi. And I think that's the key thing, because most people that I know who didn't like The Last Jedi, they basically said they didn't like Kylo Ren and they didn't really like Luke. And like Megan, I keep saying my girlfriend, I've got her into Star Wars and things. Last Jedi is her least favorite of the three. Since a few rewatches, I think she now kind of likes it a bit more, The Rise of Skywalker. But she always said, she's like, I don't like Kylo Ren that much. She's like, I'm not that fussed about him. I'm not that interested. He just kind of annoys me. And it's like, I respect her opinion. But if you don't like Kylo Ren that much, you're not going to like The Last Jedi, because it's as much his film. That's a good point. As Rey's. And I think that's one of the key turning points of why some people didn't like it. The baggage of Luke and then not liking Kylo Ren enough.
That's a good point, because if we look at the structure of the films, The Force Awakens is more plot driven. It's to get from point A to point B. This film is more character driven, and if you don't like the characters, then you probably would not like the story, because their story is not resolved at the end.
Exactly. That's very good more.
Exactly. Let's talk about some of the fan criticisms that is being thrown at this movie passionately. A lot of people talk about that the space chase plot and the whole lack of fuel thing is really rubbish, and it's not good storytelling. Some people talk about pacing and the canto bite, that it was too extended and unnecessary in the film. Others people bring up, that the reason that they dislike the film is that they completely and utterly destroy Luke Skywalker, and he is unlike anything I remember from episodes, 4, 5, and 6, and it doesn't work for me. What would you say to those kind of fans, how you personally view these popular criticisms of the film?
I think, first of all, with the Luke Skywalker comment, I think that I understand where they're coming from. I just personally disagree. Let's be honest here, okay? Luke, in A New Hope, whiny little bitch. I'm going to say it. Like, I like Luke as a character, I've got to say. But I like him the least of probably all the characters in the original trilogy.
Really?
Until Return of the Jedi.
Interesting.
In Return of the Jedi, love him. I like him in Empire Strikes Back. But let's be honest, Empire Strikes Back, he ignores Yoda, he ignores Obi-Wan, he runs into something that he shouldn't be doing, he then causes problems, he springs the trap, he gets beaten by Vader and then saved by Leia. So it's like, you didn't really help anyone. You just kind of Leia and Lando managed to get out of this without your help. They had to go back to save you. You know what I mean? Like, so that element of Luke and Luke in A New Hope, you know, he doesn't seem that phased by Baru and Owen dying, so his aunt and uncle. Yeah. But then he's really devastated about Obi-Wan dying, even though he's known him for like a day. And then also he's kind of like, with Han, he's like, oh, what? You don't believe in the Force? It's like, you didn't know what the Force was like an hour ago. What are you talking about? Like, so for me, Luke has always been like, he's kind of been whiny, but as he's gotten older and more mature, he's kind of learnt his way a bit. So for me, I'm like, I see where they're coming from, but me personally, I think Luke works really well in this film. With the pacing and the running away part, to me, really, I'm just like, it sounds silly to say, but it's like, it kind of, in my mind, it makes sense. They kind of explain it in the film. They do say, look, they're a small enough ship. They're too far away from us for our fighters to be able to get them with, connections to our ship.
Right.
We can barrage them, but their shields are too strong. To me, that makes sense. It's no more silly than, a Millennium Falcon flying and hiding away from the Empire in an asteroid field and hiding in a giant space worm. And then latching on to a Star Destroyer and they don't notice, and then floating away in garbage. But Boba Fett notices, but doesn't tell anyone. And you're just like, what? You're telling me that flying away and escaping things is more ridiculous than anything you see in the original trilogy?
Yeah.
I disagree with that, sir. And then when it comes to the Canto Bight scene, I agree somewhat. Canto Bight for me is a little bit like Jar Jar. No, not like Jar Jar, sorry, like a Phantom Menace. Every time I see it, I like it a little bit more. I'm still not the biggest fan. There are still problems with it, but really with Canto Bight, like I know people, a friend of mine called Chris Brayton, he says he's got two young daughters. One's like 8 or 9, I think, and one's a bit younger, I think. He says that their favorite part of Last Jedi is the Canto Bight scene because you get to see the Fathiers. You get Rose as like an actual character having real dialogue, getting to make her own decisions. She shows perspectives to Finn. You get to see that although this world looks cool, there's darkness behind it, which is like the real world. What's the only thing that brings profit? War. It's got all these cool elements to it. And you get a scene which is quite similar to, once again, the scene in Maz's castle and the New Hope Cantina. You get to see loads of different species, just that panning shot, and you've got all those crazy things and all the casino stuff and the shots going forward, and you see all these crazy species that are only on screen for like 2 seconds. I enjoy that part. I think it dragged on a bit. I think there were parts that kind of, it could have been shortened down a bit, but I just think it could have been shortened a bit. And I understand people's criticisms, and I feel like it feels a bit unnecessary and a bit jarring at times, but in general, I thought it was all right. It's not bad enough for me to hate it, but I was just kind of meh about it. But the rest of the film for me, the high parts of Last Jedi are so high and so good that the meh bits, they're not down here. They're not Jar Jar level. They're not bad plot. It's just a couple of meh moments. And I just don't think that. I think the good parts hugely eclipse the bad parts in this film. What are your opinions on those sort of three? I do have one big criticism of a part about Leia, which I'll get onto after this. But what were your sort of thoughts on everything I just said, basically? The three elements.
I want to begin with the Canto Bight scene, and I got to say that upon second viewing in theaters, I understood more why that scene is there and why adults may have more criticism while kids will enjoy it more. I think what undermines that scene is the fact that Rose and Finn don't succeed. Their quest is futile. They don't even get the hacker that they need. They get DJ, played by the amazing Benicio del Toro, another completely throwaway character. Just a completely waste of a character, waste of a talent. But it still works on the grounds what you mentioned, that Rose still has a character moment that she says all these profiteers, profiting off war. I just want to squash them all. Look what they're doing to the native planets and wildlife and stuff like this. It's pretty nice. It could have been shorter. But what really sells that scene to kids is all the excitement, because a lot of us as adults, we watch it through adult lens and we forgot how to be kids. And I think the fans who enjoy all this new Star Wars content more are the ones who are like kids in a good way, I think all of us can enjoy more of this stuff when we let our inner critic go. I'm not saying absorb anything like a fool, and anything that has Star Wars logo on it we should embrace and enjoy. But sometimes you just put that critic on the back burner for a moment. Enjoy for the movie for what it is and say I didn't feel like it works that well, but it was cool to look at. You don't have to put it on a pedestal, but like find something to enjoy there. In terms of space chase and the lack of fuel, people say, well, bombers don't do that in open space. There is no gravity. How is they could do it? I'm like, that's easily explained. That's space opera, dude. Really, they could have magnetized landmines or torpedoes that just fly downward because they're being magnetically pulled to the shields or something like that. Who the heck cares? Oh, they have fuel. They don't have fuel. Who cares? That's not what the story is. What I really wasn't a big fan of, and it kind of bugged me throughout the whole trilogy, is that why the guys that have won the Empire have to be a minority again. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't get it. It doesn't work. From that angle, the whole chase thing doesn't work for me, especially when they show the destruction of all 5 planets and the Force Awakens. I'm like, until that very moment, the New Republic is there and it seems to be thriving. Well, you can't set aside some budget for a proper military. Why you have like a ragtag band, a pathetic band of guys like chasing through space and finding this huge planet destroyer? Like, what is this? And when it comes to Luke and destroying the legacy of Luke Skywalker, I see the angle that if you don't like this Luke, you may not like this film and maybe the entire trilogy, that it ruins the movie for her. I'm not going to fault people for feeling this way. We all have the right to feel a particular way. I just personally, when you have to convince yourself that you like a movie, the reality is you don't like the movie. With The Last Jedi, I didn't have to rationalize myself why I like Luke. I just did. And after I did so, I looked at him in the way that he was in Return of the Jedi and the way we see him here. He literally takes a lightsaber and he discards it. It's a tool in the hands of the Jedi. It's the Jedi himself who is the light. That beam of light that separates the darkness. It's just a tool. Kenobi throw his lightsaber away and then he picks it up several times. Jedi do it all the freaking time. That's not the point. Luke sacrifices himself for the greater good in episode 6. He gives himself to the Emperor, and it's the miracle of his sacrifice, of understanding the higher levels of the Force, that calling of what he needs to be to defeat this tyrant. That's what brings Vader back. It's not the fact that he outwits him in hand-to-hand combat. It's he wins his heart over. And when we see him in this movie, in Rise of the Last Jedi, is he's that person who already suffered and bled and restored the Jedi Order and performed all the heroic tasks, the 12 labors of Hercules that everybody demanded of him. What else do you expect him to do? He's 60 plus years old. He's in the twilight of his years. And everything that he's bled for is being ruined by this young punk. And I understand that. And I understand vulnerability of Luke. And even in his twilight years, he's still Luke Skywalker in a way that he's still stubborn. And it's Rey, this young virgin soul, who comes in and she turns him around. And it's Yoda who is there to teach him in his last moments of life. It's like, hey, let go. She's got it. You already taught her everything she needs to know. Let it go. And that's why he's able, and he's passing. Like, I love all the moments in The Last Jedi. I love his passing into the Force because I did not demand of Luke Skywalker more. I did not demand Mandalorian. I did not want to see Luke in his prime. He's past his prime. The reason that I say that, to me, as much as I enjoy sequel trilogy, it still doesn't deliver. It doesn't reach that high mark of the original movies. Is that we really didn't need to see these legacy characters in these films. Their stories are logically and emotionally wrapped up and concluded in those films. Leave them alone. Bringing them back into the fold was a marketing strategy. And what's the only reasonable way you could bring Luke and make it meaningful? I think Rian Johnson had a far better answer than all the fans combined. Because he didn't give him a lightsaber and made him this badass again that everybody wanted to see. How many times can we see that over and over and over again? Luke being a badass. But making him climb this impossible wall of self-doubt and regret and self-hate and loathing and coming on top on the other side, that was the most precise decision and what made, to me, The Last Jedi the most significant film of them all in the new era Star Wars, because Rian Johnson, with all the faults that the movie has, he was able to initiate a serious dialogue what these characters need. He said, like, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sweep the rug from under these characters that you know and love. Because if they don't transform, if they don't grow, if you don't ask the hard questions, this franchise will become Marvel. It will become familiar, and you will come for these adrenaline rush, and you'll forget about it the next day. And I disagree with anyone who says that the Last Jedi is a complacent movie. It's not. It's a daring film. It doesn't succeed nearly as many things as I wanted it to succeed, but in parts where it counts with Rey, with Kylo Ren, with Luke Skywalker, he nails it.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think, as you say, Luke is... I love Luke in this film. I like the legacy characters being in it somewhat. I think, yeah, maybe they could have done without it, but I think that this film articulates how, if you're going to have a legacy character in it, that's how you do it. You have him passing the torch. And the thing is, it turns the legend of Luke Skywalker into a human. That's what we want. That's what the most interesting stories are. People, this is the thing that people don't fully understand about themselves. You know, you often talk about the Joker movie and things, but talk about the Joker as a character and Batman as a character, okay? And Spider-Man as a character. Superman is the outlier, but he was one of the first superheroes as well. But still, Joker, Batman, Superman, Spider-Man rather. All three of them are human. Granted, Spider-Man is enhanced, but you put a gun to them, they're going to die, you know? Joker's one of the fiercest villains ever. He is just a human who's gone off the deep end. Batman is just a rich human. Spider-Man is an enhanced human. You know, all of these sort of characters, they've got this human weight to them. Their reasons that they're so popular is because they are fallible. They make mistakes. Things go wrong for them, you know, on the hero side of things. Because of that, it makes them complex. It makes them interesting. I know that Superman has a lot of great stories and things, but for me, Superman's a bit boring because it's like he is basically invincible apart from like 2 or 3 things, and he is basically perfectly good and almost never makes any mistakes. That's an overgeneralization. I know there's lots of comics that dispute that, but in general, that's how Superman is. We don't want Luke Skywalker to be Superman. We like him making mistakes. Empire Strikes Back, that's him making mistakes. That is him, as I said earlier. It's literally every step of the way he constantly makes mistakes. The whole film is about him failing. And that's how in Return of the Jedi, he comes back from the depths, from failing against Vader, from almost dying, basically failing in every way he tried to succeed. He learned the wrong lessons. So in Return of the Jedi, he learns the right lessons. So what does that manifest into in Last Jedi? He thought he learned the right lessons. He says he had his hubris. He thought he could do everything perfectly. He couldn't. Just like humans, we can't do that. That's how we are. And that's what makes a character grounded. That's what makes a character interesting, when you can connect with them. Can't connect with someone who never makes a mistake, because then he just seems like a god.
I never want to see a Superman character. To me, what, you know, when I worked in a comic book, you know, shop, and I started picking up Superman, the comic books where they find his kryptonite, whether in literal form or it could be the Lois Lane being in danger, his personal inner emotional kryptonite, that's where he is at his best. When you see Superman just kicking butt left and right and just villains flying left and right, who wants to see that? Who wants to see your guy not, you know, trudge through mud and dirt and cry and, you know, and bleed and stuff like this? Who wants to see a hero who is incorruptible? It sucks. It's boring. It's like, yeah, my hero. It's almost like having a video game where you're given all the cheat codes. And when people say that's what Rey is in this trilogy, I disagree. She may be. I will concede the fact that she's overpowered a little bit. She's not a Mary Sue, because the trial that she goes through is unlike Luke Skywalker's. Her trial is emotional and spiritual. Granted, Luke Skywalker has that too in the originals, but here, yeah, she's more able physically, but emotionally, she's not there. She has a lot of stuff to learn. Mike, I want to start wrapping things up here, and I want us, you know, conclude with episode 8 on this question, and hopefully soon we'll go, you know, with the last episode 9 and perhaps discuss, you know, the entire trilogy. In summary, what are the Last Jedi's greatest triumphs for you personally, and what are the biggest disappointments?
Okay, greatest triumphs, I think, are mainly the characters. Most of the characters, excluding Finn, I'd say he's probably, Rose, I said, I think is fine. Some of the side characters are a little bit weak, as we said, Holdo. But I think the big triumphs are The majority of the characters, I think, are done very well. The new force powers, the new things they introduce, the unpredictable plot, and for the most part, the action scenes are thrilling and they're quite different and things. It's stuff we want. I want new stuff in Star Wars. I don't want a copycat of the original trilogy. I want things to be different and crazy and risk taking. That's my favorite part of The Last Jedi. It's just all the risks that Rian Johnson took. They didn't all pay off in the right way. Some of them are a bit weak or some of them are a bit jarring. But generally, the broad strokes, the main pillars of what The Last Jedi was trying to achieve was being different and interesting and unpredictable in ways that Star Wars hasn't been, which is what I want. And I think it's what you wanted in a lot of ways as well. So I think that in those elements, great job. The parts that it did wrong was, as I said, I think Finn, basically a wasted character. I think some of the supporting characters, as you said, the stuff of Holdo, why she didn't tell Poe, it doesn't make any sense. All Leia needed to say was, in all honesty, Holdo is a woman of pride. She didn't really have a plan, but she didn't want to tell you that. What she was trying to figure something out, and by the time you found out what her plan was, she'd only just come to that conclusion.
Which only proves Poe right.
Yeah, if they'd have said that, I'd have been like, okay, that makes a lot more sense. But just, oh yeah, you're one of the biggest people left, especially where our entire fleet and everyone's getting murdered, and we've got like a few hundred people left. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell anyone else. It's like, yeah, that didn't. One or two lines of dialogue easily could have fixed that. And then the biggest thing, and this is something that didn't bother me when I first saw the film, but the more I watch it, the more it bothers me, is the Leia scene, which is when she gets flies out into space and stuff. And
the Mary Poppins scene.
Yeah. Now, I haven't got a problem with Leia being force sensitive or even be able to survive in space necessarily. That's not the problem. The problem I have is that from the first viewing, I thought myself of a way better way to do the scene without really thinking too hard about it. You know, Akbar being killed off screen, I'm not a big fan of that. I mean, let's be blunt here. Akbar's a cool character. He's not, excluding Legends, he's not actually in the films that much. Him dying, he's cool. He says it's a trap. That's a great meme. But realistically, although he's important in the story and about the comics and the books and everything else, in just the films, he's not in it that much. Yeah, I'm not that fussed about him dying. It's a bit there. But I just think that when the explosion happened and when Leia, you know, she has that moment where she goes, whoosh, and she shooshes back. All would need to happen, she gets sucked out of space a little bit, and then she uses the force, maybe do a bit of slow-mo, and just kind of force zooms back in a little bit, gets to the door, and then kind of passes out as she goes through the door. What I didn't like is her being in space, like, when you see it, like the shot of the ship here, she's like here, and you're like, okay, so she's really, really, really far away. She's somehow, her entire body is fine. She hasn't got a mark on her at all from being in an explosion and being flown out of space debris. She's in space for maybe, if we're being generous, a minute. It seems like longer than a minute. It seems like a couple minutes. She has ice on her face, and she's been in space for so long. And then she's just like, let's go. And you're just like, you could have probably done that in a better way.
Let's go.
Yeah, her just being passed out in space, and then she opens her eyes and goes, oh, wait a minute, I'm not dead. Let's go. The Force is quite a reactionary thing, I find. I think that's what a lot of the stuff is saying. You do focus, you think about it, you do, or it's a split reaction. It's not, oh, they've kind of died. It's not like Super Saiyans in like Dragon Ball Z. It's not like you get near death and then suddenly you're empowered and more powerful. That's not really how it seems to work.
Well, in her defense, she does end up in a coma for half of the movie.
Yeah, which I think is fine. I just think that she shouldn't have floated all the way out into space and been seemingly dead for a while. Once again, just to make us think that she had died. Yeah. That's the only reason she was out in space that long. And I just, that's once again, Rian Johnson trying too many times in places that didn't need it to be unpredictable. In the big parts of the plot, like with the Snoke stuff, amazing. Most of the big unpredictable bits, loved it. It's just these little in-between moments where it just seems like they were doing that just for kind of the sake of it. That's kind of my take on the film. What about yourself?
I would say that the film's greatest triumphs are what you described as the larger strokes, you know, the larger themes, the Luke Skywalker, the Kylo Ren, Rey, you know, the defeat of Snoke in order for Kylo Ren to finally ascend as a proper villain. Most of the ideas I think that he executed well. It always makes me wonder, and unfortunately we'll never know the answer to this question, is how much of it was really Rian Johnson and how much was the committee deciding what goes and what doesn't in the film. Because let's face it, they try to promote these films as like complete creative freedom, blah, 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 blah. There's money involved. There's hundreds of millions of dollars involved in making these films. They want to be safe. I think with what we're working with within the context of this new Disney era films, it was the most daring one. It did not always succeed, but it what I appreciate the most about the film is Rian Johnson challenging fans, challenging status quo, and saying like, look, maybe I didn't 100% succeed here, but this is the direction it needs to go. Because believe it or not, I think that one aspect in which Mandalorian succeeds as well is because it's trying to do something differently. And ironically, fans dislike TLJ are the fans who like The Mandalorian, but they're trying to accomplish the same goal. Yeah. They're all trying to go back to the basics, but try to be different about it. And I think Mandalorian was a breath of fresh air where you come into it and you have to convince yourself whether it's good or not. You just like it. Even myself, I have like 25 different reasons that, problems in that. I enjoy the show. It's just fun. You don't need to tell yourself it's good. It just is, right? So that's the biggest crowning achievement. It's him trying things differently. And I think even if the movie suffers, even if the movie is not as great as we want it to be, that's what needs to happen in order for them to stop asking George Lucas to come and help. George to the rescue. Do it yourself. Do it differently. Do it in different genres. Do a space detective story in the Star Wars world. You know what I mean? Do a film noir kind of thing. Look at the Visions. When this came out, that's exactly what Star Wars needs times 10. The Visions, I think, is The Last Jedi amplified. The biggest disappointments of the film are, I would also agree with you, are just these small decisions that actually amounts to a lot, honestly. It's a bittersweet experience because it sucks not to see Luke pull out his X-Wing out of that ocean. It sucks not to see Luke in his full power, even though I personally rationalize it and say that if you really wanted to see Luke Skywalker in his prime, George Lucas should have done a proper trilogy in 1999 instead of going back. He should have made it when the cast was young, Mark Hamill was capable of kicking ass, I think some of the disappointments are where, I don't want to say wokeism or toxic feminism and stuff like this, but there are a couple of social issues that trickle into the film that don't need to be there. Yes, I want, more than anything else, I want us to be fully represented as community, as people, citizens of the world in a way that Star Trek does it, and look at each other and respect our, differences. But you can't participate in something like, oh, this is what this crowd is paying attention to. That's what they want. We as a company, as a corporation, need to make sure we address this issue and we mark off all the check boxes and say that we participate. We're going to put an Asian person here. We're going to put a feminist person here. We're going to put this, all fine and good. I'm not against that, okay? I'm not saying Star Wars should be like bigoted, male-dominated thing, but it never was. That's the thing. Why are you trying to sugarcoat it with all this extra modern sensibility where it never was that? Leia kicked ass from the start. Lando Calrissian, Billy D. Williams, right? The way that he describes his first interview with George Lucas, he said, look, he just saw me. He saw my potential and talent as an actor. I was already an established actor. He said, I want you in this movie. He said, I never tried to portray Lando Calrissian as a person of color. I just wanted to create an interesting person and a charisma and the vibe and the energy that Billy D. Williams gives off in that film is something that we didn't have in The Last Jedi. I believe that in all of the sequel trilogy, we had cast members who were just there for Disney's virtual signaling purposes. Like, we're paying attention. We have this person. Even Lando Calrissian's daughter in the last Rise of the Skywalker. Like, okay, what is she adding to the movie? I am a person that represents this. And stop with that. That's annoying. That's great. My biggest disappointment is when the new content, new Star Wars, tries to cater to fans or to any cultural movements. Stop it. Star Wars doesn't need to be politics. I wholeheartedly agree with fans because I don't believe they're bigots. I don't believe they want to discriminate when they say, like, bring the politics out of Star Wars. We just want to have a good time. Life is as hard as it is already. I just want to go back to my movies, to my wife, to my kids, and just have a good experience, Any closing thoughts, anything else before next time we hopefully will begin to talk about the Rise of the Skywalker? Maybe you want to kind of preface it, have a few words about that.
Yeah, it's fine. I would say And with your points, I agree with most of them. I would probably disagree somewhat with the politics thing, only on the basis that I think, there's a lot of Star Wars. Politics has always been a part of Star Wars, but I know
Yeah.
what you're saying about the specific, the wokeisms and stuff. Kind of
Yeah.
the thing is with the biggest issues, I think, with the sequel trilogy, and I think with The Rise of Skywalker, I think The Rise of Skywalker, as my friend Dave put it, is a film by committee. It's not a film, and you know this because, like, I know Rogue One had a lot of rewrites. I know that Solo had different directors and things in mind. And this is an example of these things.
Yeah.
Although Rogue One turned out excellently, I like Solo. I think it's cool, but it's not my favorite. But the Rise of Skywalker, specifically for me, fell so flat because it just felt like every part in there that was a problem felt like it was something that someone who doesn't really like Star Wars is telling people that's what Star Wars is about. And I think that with The Last Jedi and with the sequel trilogy in general, most of the little moments in there are either slight oversights about things like little details or little bits and pieces here, or trying too hard to make it as close to the original trilogy, trying to be like, hey, look, even if you didn't like the Last Jedi much, this one's got Palpatine in, this one's got this in. Don't worry about, Ben gets redeemed.
Catering.
Everything is the same. Yeah, and it feels like, as you said in lots of your previous videos without me in it, it's just like, especially The Rise of Skywalker, just felt like they were trying to make a film. There's a group of people who weren't even that into Star Wars, who were just trying to make the most amount of money and said, how can we get the most amount of people into the cinema to see this film? And that's what we got with The Rise of Skywalker. So, as I said, I enjoy The Rise of Skywalker. It's probably my least favorite of all Star Wars films, maybe. Probably on par with Phantom Menace, I'd say. But I think it's got some great parts. I think it's got some cool parts. But I think it's the opposite for me with Last Jedi. I think Last Jedi in the broad strokes was ace, and in the small details has the problems. And I think with The Rise of Skywalker, the small details are amazing. The broad strokes are the problems. And I think that that's why with the two films, they're so divisive in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, I as I said, I really like Last Jedi. I really think if anyone's watched it once and thinks they don't like it, give it a rewatch. The second watch really, really made me realize how much I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. So that's my kind of ending thoughts on that regard.
Yeah, it's I liked the film on the first watch. I really, really immensely enjoyed it, and I actually enjoyed it even more on a second watch. It's to this day my favorite Disney era film. And I just really like it a lot. And I just wanted to reiterate the point that you don't have to like everything about the film for it to be interesting and good. And I don't think anyone is in position, not even a filmmaker himself, not George Lucas, not Dave Filoni, what is or isn't Star Wars. It's like there's a whole debate about legends and canon. Star Wars is what's fun for me. That's Star Wars. Yeah. Anyway, Mike, thanks for joining me. I really enjoy hearing your thoughts. I love how we disagree on certain things and we illuminate it for ourselves, hopefully for the audience who is going to view it. I always appreciate your mind, and I can't wait for us to talk about The Rise of the Skywalker, a movie which I enjoyed surprisingly. But anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. Please, if you enjoy this video, consider subscribing to Mike's channel. He has awesome podcasts there. Subscribe to this channel as well, Star Wars Timeline. In our next video, Mike and I are going to cover the Rise of the Skywalker, and perhaps we'll talk about the trilogy as well in general. And we would love to hear your comments in the section below, what you thought of these films. What's your favorite moments? What are the biggest triumphs, and the biggest flaws? And we'll see you guys next time.
See you later.